All right, today we are pulling back the curtain on military history to talk about its most overlooked hero, logistics. Yeah, I know. Forget the famous generals and the epic battles for just a minute. We're going to talk about the silent, invisible force that really decides who wins and who loses. Let's dive in.
So, let me just ask you this. When you picture what it takes to win a war, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it some brilliant general, a real strategic genius? Or maybe it's the incredible bravery of the soldiers on the front line. Or, of course, just having better tanks, better planes, better weapons. I mean, these are the stories we love, right? It's the stuff that fills the history books. But that's not the whole picture, not even close.
The real story, the one that's happening just out of sight, behind the front lines, is about something way less glamorous, but honestly, it's infinitely more important. It's about what have been called the invisible sinews, the hidden threads that literally hold an army together and keep it from falling apart.
And that brings us to the real engine of war, military logistics. It sounds kind of simple, doesn't it? But it's this massive, incredibly complex science of getting everything you need to exactly the right place at precisely the right time.
And just to be super clear, we're not just talking about a few trucks driving down a road. Logistics is the entire chain. It starts with planning what an army is going to need months or even years in advance. Then you have to get all that stuff, transport it across oceans and continents, store it, and then finally distribute it to the individual soldier who needs it. It's the whole machine.
And the scale of this whole challenge is, well, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. A modern army has a truly endless appetite. And feeding that massive appetite is the single biggest problem of any military campaign. Just try to imagine it for a second. You have to provide this constant, massive flow of resources to keep a huge force operating in the field. So let's break down what we're actually talking about here. First, you've got the absolute basics, right? We're talking vast quantities of food and water. And not just for one day, for every single soldier, every single day, for as long as the fight goes on. Then there's the ammo, a continuous, nonstop flow of it. Every bullet, every artillery shell, every missile that gets fired has to be replaced, and it has to be replaced constantly.
And on top of all that, you have literally everything else. Fuel for the trucks, tanks, and jets. Spare parts for all the equipment that breaks down. Medical supplies for the wounded. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on.
So how in the world do you manage all this chaos? Well, over centuries, military planners have basically developed a playbook. You could call them the 5 golden rules of supply.
Okay, so this playbook is built on 5 core ideas. First up, sufficiency. This one's simple. You have to have enough stuff, period. Not having enough means you can't fight at full strength. Second, timeliness. That stuff has to arrive exactly when it's needed. Showing up a day late with ammo is basically the same as never showing up at all. Third is economy. Resources are finite, so you can't be wasteful. Number 4 is flexibility. This is a big one. It means you have a central plan, but you give commanders on the ground the freedom to adapt. And finally, and this might be the most important one, is resilience. Your supply system has to be able to take a punch and keep on going. And that idea of resilience is so critical, because you can bet your enemy is always going to try and punch that system. A supply line is the lifeblood of an army, for sure, but it is also its greatest vulnerability. It's the classic Achilles heel.
I mean, if you want the ultimate cautionary tale, just look at Napoleon's invasion of Russia back in 1812. It wasn't just the Russian army or the brutal winter that destroyed his massive force. It was the complete, total, catastrophic collapse of his logistics. His supply lines weren't resilient. Starvation, the freezing cold, and constant attacks on his supplies absolutely annihilated one of the greatest armies the world had ever seen. This strategy, attacking the supply line, it actually has a name. It's called interdiction, and it is as old as war itself. It's just the methods that have changed with technology. What started as simple ambushes on wagon trains evolved into cavalry raids and artillery strikes. Then, in the modern era, you got air power bombing railways and submarines sinking supply ships. And today, it's cyber attacks that mess with GPS or electronic warfare that jams communications. But the goal is always the same: cut that artery.
And, beyond all the tactical problems, there's a really devastating human cost to all this. When supplies run dry, morale just gets crushed. Soldiers lose faith in their leaders. They get tired, hungry, and vulnerable. Discipline completely breaks down. Because at the end of the day, a soldier without bullets, without food, or without medicine simply cannot fight effectively. Which brings us to our final and maybe most critical point. Sometimes logistics isn't just playing a supporting role. Sometimes logistics is the main event. It becomes the decisive factor. It is the fight. A perfect example of this is the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954. So have a look at this. On one side, you've got the French, with a high-tech, heavily fortified base that was supplied entirely by airplanes. Looked good on paper. But on the other side, you had the Vietnamese forces, the Viet Minh. And what did they have? Bicycles and human porters. But their logistical system was the definition of ingenious, flexible, and resilient. They managed to haul heavy artillery through impossible jungle terrain, piece by piece. They surrounded the French, shot down their supply planes, and completely severed that logistical artery. And they won a massive, decisive victory against a much more technologically advanced enemy.
This is what military experts call a force multiplier. So what does that really mean? It means that great logistics doesn't just add to an army's strength, it actually multiplies it. With a rock-solid supply chain, an army's ability to attack, to defend, and to move around the battlefield all become exponentially better. It's the ultimate amplifier.
In fact, logistics can become the primary weapon itself. Think about World War I. The Allied naval blockade of Germany wasn't a traditional battle with guns and explosions. No, it was a slow, methodical strangulation of Germany's entire ability to fight. By cutting off its supply of food and essential war materials, the Allies used logistics itself as a decisive weapon that played a huge part in Germany's eventual collapse. So, from ancient armies marching on foot to the modern military, the fundamental truths of logistics really haven't changed all that much. But the technology? It is evolving faster than ever. And that leaves us with a pretty big question for the future. In an age of AI, automated drone delivery, and maybe even conflict in space, what's the next great logistical challenge going to be? And who is going to be the first to master it?